Welcome back to another episode of the Sky Society podcast. Today, I am so excited to be chatting with Anna Payawal. She is the editorial director at Pottery Barn. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Natalie. So glad to be here.
So glad to have you on the podcast and talk about your journey in the home space. Anna has, we were just talking about 30 years of working at Pottery Barn, which is insane.
Well, it's been 30 years since I first started
30 years since, yes, 30 years since she's first started there. She's currently working there now as an editorial director, and previously has worked at Serena and Lily and Restoration Hardware. So a ton of valuable experience to share with us today. Before we get into all of that fun stuff, Anna, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. Well, I am really a brand writer and strategist at heart. To me, that's the perfect left brain, right brain activity, crafting copy with a business challenge in mind. And I just feel so lucky that I'm in creative marketing because I get to do that kind of problem solving every day. And currently I am the editorial director at Pottery Barn. I've been there a little over 2 years now. And my team is responsible for delivering copy across all channels. So site, everything from product pages to seasonal home pages, feature landing pages, print, so catalog, packaging, in-store collateral. And then for the performance marketing channel, which is huge volume, all the daily emails, the paid marketing, and some organic social as well, usually when the latter is tied to campaigns, because my team is also responsible for delivering the 360 marketing initiatives. And then prior to Pottery Barn, I was, like you said, at Serena and Lily for 9 years, which was so much fun. One of the best places I've ever worked, just great product, great people. And so I was their editorial director and VP of content for 9 years when the company was really going through, I would say, a pretty expansive growth period. So they were entering new business categories. They were opening stores for the first time, and they were really establishing their trade marketing and influencer programs. So it was just a time where I got my hands on a lot of things creatively. The strategy part of all of that was really interesting to kind of, piece together for a brand, all of those channels as they were sort of becoming this omni brand. And then 5 years before that, sorry, long story. 5 years before that, I was at RH, started out as a copywriter, became copy manager, and then content director. Also, when they were evolving the brand, really expanding their catalog channel, their store footprint, and their designer partnerships as well. And then what got me there was, several years working at small branding agencies as a designer, actually, in San Francisco, and some design studios, and then freelance writing as well. So that was, I've been so lucky because I've had that run in-house, working for brands and working on the client side of things. And I've also had that sort of external agency experience working for those branding agencies. And having those two disciplines like copy and design, for me personally, it's enriched my work because you sort of see the whole thing more holistically. And when you're leading teams, you're leading a team of writers and designers in what I do. So I think it makes you a more empathetic leader too, because you can kind of you understand what it takes, and you can see the project like 360. You can anticipate blockers. You can kind of speak the team's language, and there's just more trust, I think, there.
Can you tell me? So I've definitely have heard the value that you get from working on both agency and client side and getting both perspectives. What I think was so interesting about what you said is that you weren't just a writer, you were a designer. Can you tell me about the design piece that you did there?
Well, it's so funny because this is where the full circle of Pottery Barn enters the story, because I was in my mid-20s and I knew I wanted to work with words. I have a BFA in creative writing, so I've always had that sort of creative writer dreamer side. And I thought I would be a book editor, which I had done a little bit of. I was also really interested in copywriting. And that's what I thought, that everybody does that, right? That's what they do. They want to, if you're a copywriter, you go work for an agency. So I was sort of gazing in that direction, but I was between jobs and really needed to pay the bills. So what I did was I signed up for a temp agency, and one of my assignments, like just plum luck, was Pottery Barn. And
Really?
yeah, but it wasn't a creative job. It was actually to be the exec admin to the person who was then head of Pottery Barn merchandising. And
Oh.
so, and at the end of that assignment, I think I was there for 2 or 3 weeks. Someone was gone, her assistant was going on her honeymoon. And so I was working as an assistant, and I guess she saw something in me because she said, "Are you looking for a full-time job?" I don't think she could finish her sentence. I was like, "Yes." And and it turned out that they needed a product information specialist. So this is, I swear to God, this is going to take me to design, but I had no idea what that was. And I was like, well, all right, let's find out about this role. And the person who was going to be my boss, I fell in love with her. She was so smart. And just, I could just tell, like, if I put myself in the proximity of her and sort of the creativity that I felt was happening there, good things would happen. So I ended up doing that role. Part of it was proofing catalogs for product accuracy, in my role as product information specialist. And I was like, oh, that looks interesting. What's going on over there? And to her credit, I think I worked with her for about a year, the woman who became my boss, and she opened up some doors for me in the catalog production department at Williams-Sonoma Inc., which owns Pottery Barn. So I took a few courses, and when there was a job that opened up in catalog production, the head of creative, like, I had been in conversation with him, and I said, hey, this is something I'd like to, I'm really interested in. I'll do what it takes to get there. And a job opened up, and he gave me a shot, and I took it. And then that spurred, a 5-year stint in design and production, catalog production at Williams-Sonoma, and then at design studios in San Francisco, branding and design studios.
What you never thought that temp job would
No,
have ever led you there.
no. And that's what I love about, like, sometimes you have to say yes, and
Yeah.
you just have to kind of take a chance. Like, to your question of taking risks earlier, like, I'm actually a pretty risk averse person, but I'm pretty curious. So I was like, well, let's just see. What do I have to lose? And then it just, following your curiosity, I think, just opens up doors. And then you just get yourself on this path. You meet people, you make connections. And then you have to do the work, of course, to earn your keep. But I think that just is a very virtuous cycle that just keeps you going in your career.
I love that reframe from, taking risks to just being curious. I think that's kind of an easier step that we can
Right.
take of, okay, maybe I'm not looking at as something risky, but I'm looking at being curious, exploring, trying something new, just learning.
Right.
And look where that got you to a place that you probably never had envisioned for yourself. As you said, you were like, I like writing, so I'm going to be an editor. I'm going to go to an
Right.
agency. And you went on this complete detour. I'm also curious because you mentioned that your education was also for writing, that you were able to make this transition into catalog design and such. And you mentioned that you took some courses. Were those courses through Pottery Bar? Were there courses that you took on your own so you could prepare for that role?
Yeah, they were courses I took on my own, Photoshop, back then Illustrator. I mean, kind of learning the tools that you need to know to do graphic design. And then it was a lot of learning on the job. It was really a lot of on the job training. And I'm just, again, just so grateful that I just had people in my life who were willing to open doors and really just help me learn. And I think it is a very symbiotic relationship. Again, you have to get in there and do good work and absorb as much as you can, really learn as much as you can. But it just takes one person giving you that shot, And I mean, that has always been the case for me. So yeah, it was really just learning some design programs. And then because I was already in that world, so to back up for a second, that product information role that I took at Pottery Barn, that first thing that I said yes to, part of that job was being exposed to the art of putting catalogs together and knowing the teams that had to kind of collaborate to do that. So I already kind of knew what it took to put a book together, and then just learning, like I said, on the job, like this is how to do a layout, this is what to look for. Just sort of, it was on the job training for sure. Yeah. But I think, you have to have some practical knowledge, of course, to have people see that you can at least have the bare minimum to get the job done. And then, I think because I was so interested in it, I think passion also is a good teacher, because you just want to learn as much as you can and observe. Like I would say, just observing everyone around me who was doing the work that I wanted to do, whether that was a great designer. I mean, San Francisco is ripe with great design, graphic design, especially back then. This was, mid to late 90s. There was so much going on in the design world here, so I think just looking at other people's work, which works were winning awards, which designer, not that I'm all about awards, but I mean, it's just sort of like, who's the cool, relevant, hip designer out there that I could pick something up from just by looking at their work, kind of
You
emulate.
immersed yourself in that world
Totally.
to learn about it.
Yeah.
The reason I find this area so interesting, and maybe someone listening isn't particularly interested in getting into the creative aspect, but what I think is applicable to everyone is that you were unqualified for that role on paper.
Yes.
But you still got that role. And I think that so many women struggle with the imposter syndrome that makes them, when they apply to a job, already say in their head, I'm not going to get it. Or maybe if an opportunity comes up at work, they're like, I don't have the skills for that, I can't do it. And they're already eliminating themselves in their own heads from those opportunities. And I think that what you said of that curiosity aspect of being open, and then also that you took those classes on your own and you were like, okay, I'm going to do everything I can. And yes, you're learning on the job, but you also are doing that own work, outside of your work time. My question that I have for you is, when it comes to overcoming this imposter syndrome and it comes to like taking on a role that you've never ever done before, how do you get that confidence or overcome that fear or that self-doubt in order to be successful, or any advice on how to be a good learner in order to pick up the skills really quickly in a role you don't know anything about?
Yeah, such a good question. I mean, for me, it was about asking questions, getting comfortable with that. It doesn't actually come that easily to me, except at work. in my personal life, no, doesn't come that easily. But at work, I think, I want to do a good job, and I want to succeed, and I want to take my work to the next level. And there's no way around it. If you don't know something, you've got to ask. I think just little baby steps. It's like, you don't have to ask, like, how do I become a designer? Although maybe that's how the conversation started, but it's like, what do I need to know in order to design a page? Like, just start small and then just sort of build your knowledge from there. And I think also just remembering that everyone, like you said, each and every one of us has that feeling. It's not unique to us. It feels like it is, because it's so hard to get over that fear. But I think, well, grown up me, back then, I don't know if I had the wherewithal to really see this, but I see it so clearly now that we have more in common than we think we do, and where that's concerned. And I think there are actually more people willing to help us than we would think. If I had probably stopped and let my fear distract me, I don't know that I would have taken those steps to have lunch with the head of creative, who I didn't know from Adam, except for like, I would see him, when we were working on a catalog, but I mean, I didn't have any other connection with him. I mean, he was kind of far removed from what I was doing at the time. But I think just, asking him to go to lunch, asking him what he thought I needed to have in place to be given a shot, was the first step. And I think once you do that first thing that you're scared of, and then you can do the next thing you're scared of. And then you gain confidence, like inch by inch sometimes, you know? And then I think just having the humility to learn, because you're going to make mistakes, you know, you're not going to be perfect. And just knowing that that's part of it too. And kind of it's great for resilience too. You kind of build a thick skin, right? Like when you're making mistakes and learning from your mistakes. And then I think, like I said before, observation. I think just look around you. If you're the junior member on the team, let's say, who around you is doing the job that you want? How are they doing it? What are they modeling? You know, I think they can be great leaders sometimes, I mean, or teachers for you without even knowing it. You know, I go back to like the boss at the product information job that I had. I don't know that she thought she was mentoring me, but that's certainly the role that she ended up playing for me. You know, she taught me about product. She taught me about interior design, all the design terminology. Like she really did essentially give me a course in product marketing through the responsibilities of that job. And I think seeking out a mentor, if you can, you know, helps as well.
The last thing I want to talk about before I want to go more into what you're currently doing at Pottery Barn, but sticking on this area because I think it's so applicable to everyone, is when you have a role at a company, right? You got your foot in the door at Pottery Barn, but that first job, you know, you wanted to go elsewhere after that, right? And so I think there's a lot of people that are in a role at a company that they don't want to be at, and they want to make a transition into a different department or a different team and just do something, you know, something else. And they may be thinking in their head, they're probably like, well, I don't have an opportunity like this. No one ever offered me to, you know, be the mentor. No one ever gave me that opportunity. So can you maybe speak to how to create opportunities? I always like to say there's like a combination of like random luck, but also creating your own luck and creating more opportunities to be lucky. So if you could speak to that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, totally. I was just thinking about that, like that you have to kind of put yourself on some path to help the good things find you.
Yes.
And right. And for me, again, I built this over time, but networking, like you said before, it's so important. And it doesn't mean that you have to have like an arsenal of 100 people, you know, out there. But I think of one person, you know, who might know somebody else at that place that you're interested in, or doing a role that you're interested in. And then the informational chat from there, like, hey, I heard that you worked at X, you know, I'm really interested. Like, can you tell me a little bit about that place, this role? I think so. Reaching out and networking, to kind of learn more about the role or the company that you're interested in. I think doing the work, I keep going back to it because I think it does a couple of things. First, it hones your skills, right? And you need to kind of add value to the org, know how you're adding value to an org, in order to get notice, in order to market yourself properly. But I think that, you know, when your work gets noticed because you're conscientious, you deliver on time, on brand, all of that, then people are more willing to pass your name along. So it's like, whether you're asking someone to advocate for you or not, your job can help you, you
Yeah,
know?
proving yourself a little bit more of the value
Exactly.
that you have.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think a lot of it is just really, you know, your reputation, the word of mouth, like, are you a collaborative person? Are you, you know, a kind person to work with? Like, I think there's a lot of people talk about their personal brand, but I do think how you show up at work, you know, the kind of impression that you leave your teammates with can be one of the ways to get that job down the road. I mean, here's another miraculous thing about this Pottery Barn. It's like, I always joke that like Pottery Barn gave me every job I've ever had, you know, from that first job. I have had so many freelance gigs from the connections that I made there. And sometimes they don't come back until like 10 years later. You know, like thinking of this one job that I got, and it was like literally one of the first people that I met at Pottery Barn in the mid-90s, you know? And it's just sort of you kind of, there's a professional network out there and you sort of all keep in touch loosely, but they kind of remember you from what you've done, who you know. Well, not who you know, that sounds funny, but who you've worked with rather. Oh, and the person who was the Pottery Barn art director actually became my own boss on 2 separate occasions. That's another funny thing about, you know, making connections at the place you work and how it can open doors for you. So he recruited me to work for his branding agency a couple of years after we first met at Pottery Barn. And then, craziest thing of all, when I was interviewing at Serena and Lily, little did I know that he was too, at the same time. So
Oh
he
my
became my boss at Serena and Lily like 12 years later. So it's kind of funny. I worked for his branding studio. I worked with him and for him at Serena and Lily for several years. So I think just the trail that you leave, you know, I'll say the trail you leave kind of helps you get those jobs and gets you noticed.
Even
Opens
if
up.
you don't know in the moment where how it will come into play in the future. Yeah,
Totally.
like that, for that random example, took 12 years.
Yeah.
The one
Yeah.
last thing I want to add on to everything you said was great, is that going back to that curiosity piece of that, if you do want to move into a different department, and you kind of touched on this, of being curious and talking to the people in those roles, and also being vocal that you're interested and want to move there. And I think this goes back to what you said too, like people do want to help you, and people genuinely, you know, want to help other people. So if you also want to make a switch into a new role of just being vocal about it and actually saying that you're interested and that you want to hear more about what they're doing and you want to help them with any projects if you can, and not just expecting people to read your mind and somehow know the moves that you want to make if you're not actually talking about them.
Right. Completely. Yeah. I mean, whoever said, you know, you won't get what you don't ask for. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so wise. Yeah. I think it never hurts to be honest about what you're interested in. And I think what can shine through is your passion. I think maybe sometimes people, you know, not only do we sometimes get imposter syndrome, but it's almost, there's this fear that expressing interest in something that we are not doing means that I don't love my job or I'm not committed here. And so they sort of suffer in silence. And I would say just flip that and say, I love what I do, and I'm also interested in this, you
I'm
know?
so glad you said that. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, it also, there's so much to be said for, you know, your guardian angels that kind of like help you along and give you those opportunities. But I really do believe in, I guess I'm just an optimist. I believe that the universe sort of just gives us what we need. It might not be when we want it, you know, but I really do believe in, think, like, envision where you want to be, do what you can to head in that direction, and you will eventually meet people who can help you. But you've got to ask. And I have to say, you know, as a manager, like, I talk to my team, you know, past and present, I talk to them about the importance, especially as women. And you know, I work with people all over the board, like age-wise, over the years I have. I think it's so important to just assert ourselves and not, not wait for things to come to us, whether it's like a raise, a promotion, going to that different department, like you said. I think we kind of have to get over ourselves. It's such an interesting piece of the puzzle, the psychology of how we ask for what we want and believe that we deserve it. You know, I think having the courage to speak, you have to have that conviction. And I go back again to know your skill set. Like, I think knowing yourself in the workplace boils down to know what you're good at, so you can keep honing it, right? And become an expert in whatever that is. And that is the thing that's going to help you market yourself to HR people, hiring managers, or even just for that stretch project that you want, right? Like you can say, I can do this because. So I think those two things become really important, I don't know
Yeah,
if I answered your question.
that
Or
is beautiful. Yes,
okay.
I think above and beyond answering my question.
Okay.
And I even loved how you said that you have to believe that you deserve it. Like how
It's
that part is so,
hard,
so good. And it
right?
is so hard, especially when you're young. That is so hard.
So hard. I have to every day.
Yeah, same.
Some days are better than others, but I really do think we need to do that for ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah.
Gosh, this is like, yeah, you're like my therapist today, Natalie.
I'm glad. Hopefully we're inspiring some deep existential thoughts for our listeners
Right?
today. I love it. But yeah, I think those things are so important. And like what you said too, really knowing yourself in the workplace. And I think leading with mindfulness, I've talked about that, a lot of that. Sometimes we're just so focused on like moving fast. We're not even like looking internally at ourselves and
Mhm.
asking ourselves if we're happy, if we like it, what we're good at, what we want to do, all those important questions.
I love that you said that, because that's another thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is do what you love. Like, who doesn't want to go to work inspired and doing what they love every
Yeah.
day? I mean, I- you sound like the kind of person that's maybe had this experience too, that it is true that when you do what you love, it does not feel like work. You don't mind the longer hours on some
Mhm.
days, and it also helps you pass the really rough days when you kind of have to like talk yourself into reloving your job.
Yes, that's so true. And that's so true. And yeah, that starts with just being really present and
Oh,
mindful and
totally.
all of that. So I think everything we talked about, so much good stuff. I'm so excited that we were able to make that tangent and discuss everything around being curious and asking your way to success. I love that. I now want to go into your current role over at Pottery Barn as an editorial director. And you touched a little bit at the beginning of the episode on all of the things that you touch in this role. You touch a lot of different areas of copy, but I'd love to hear a little bit more because I know this is a super niche role. And again, kind of keeping in with the theme of Sky Society podcast of that there are a lot of roles out there that you may not even be aware of. So I love you can dive a little bit deeper into what you do at Pottery Barn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of the functions, it is interesting because my team runs, like I said, across all of those channels. So we have to deal with the print team, the digital team, um, different considerations when you're working with copy, and the timelines are different, but the seasons overlap. So you have to be very good about keeping track of um like there's certain fit issues on print that you might not have, on a big digital page, but you have to tell the same story. So you kind of have
Mhm.
to know how to edit your work that way. Then I also have like our team is comprised of two, let's call them copy functions. One is the product editorial team, so the team responsible for the product pages. So straight up copywriting, working, romancing products, really getting to know the products on a much deeper level, so that you're romancing those products for the site, and kind of creating the main romance that then the other team has to pick up for the marketing ads, the catalog writing, the campaigns. On the other side, there's what at Pottery Barn is the brand writing team, and that's the campaign writing, the storytelling on the feature pages, the seasonal home pages. So it's kind of taking all of the product romance stories and building bigger stories around that to kind of bring the seasonal vision to life and communicate the Pottery Barn design point of view. So it's copywriting sort of across that spectrum. In terms of being an editorial director specifically, I mean, as I mentioned before, each brand is different, but in my experience, the editorial director, in addition to the obvious, you're sort of leading the team on brand language, so voice, tone. You're also kind of, along with the design director, you're leading the creative team for the brand expression. So how are you pulling the words and the visuals together to present your brand in an inspirational, aspirational, compelling way? I'm also in this role, and in other editorial roles have been responsible for a piece of the content strategy. So working with other marketing leaders, what is that seasonal roadmap? Which stories, which channels, which campaigns have to really be firing so that you can get the seasonal objectives out there in front of the customers, and really communicate what Pottery Barn is standing for in a particular season. And then there's the editorial programming piece. So a little bit more tactical, but still strategic, like literally putting the editorial calendar together along with the other marketing leads and figuring out what is that marketing cadence and that marketing mix that brings all of that vision to life. And one of the things that I love most about being part of a creative team, whether you're an individual contributor or helping to lead the team, is I always think of it as like, as the executional team, we're kind of the anchor in that relay race. It's like you're taking the baton from the business teams, the product design teams, the photo teams, and you're kind of running all of those objectives to the finish line. It's like all the hopes and dreams of that particular campaign, that particular season. It's like you're all sprinting to the finish line. Just like when you make it and your work helps drive results and you help elevate the brand, like to me, there's just nothing more fun and more rewarding,
Yeah, well, first off, your role obviously seems to cover a wide variety of things, which is super interesting just to hear how many things you get to touch in that position. What I'm interested in hearing more about is copywriting. So we think like way, way basic when we're starting out marketing and we learn copywriting, to now that you've like gotten to, grow in your career and niche on a specific field. I'm interested for someone who does enjoy copywriting, or who's someone that enjoys storytelling, which I know is also a big part of copywriting. What are some of the things that you look for in successful copywriters, or the things that the qualities or skills that you possess that have made you successful in your career that someone younger maybe can start honing or working on now?
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of basic copywriting, right? Like the bare minimum. I mean, obviously, you got to be a good writer. You got to write a clear sentence. But I think a product copywriter, I mean, since that's my area of expertise, it's really like dealing with product or romancing a brand. I think you need to have, again, that curiosity about the space that you're in. So in my case, if I'm writing about, a sofa, I need to really be willing to learn everything there is about that particular style. What were the origin stories? How is it made? What makes it so special? What differentiates it from the other 100 sofas I might be selling? How does that product differentiate this brand in the marketplace? So I think really being able to get to the heart of what you need to know in order to present your brand in a compelling way to the customer and really make that product shine. So you have to be strategic about what you're writing. I mean, I think that's what, a copywriter needs to have a good, a copywriter has to be able to craft copy, but I think that ability to zero in on what will make your copy influence someone's behavior is what will make you a good copywriter, not just a writer. And really having that ability to do a deep dive in whatever industry you happen to be writing for. If you're selling cars, know everything there is to know about that car. If you're selling, I don't know, pools, know everything there is to know about pools. So I think you just have to really want to be a subject matter expert. I think in terms of the larger storytelling, that I'd say that's where the writers really start to separate themselves. I think when you can kind of take those product stories, those origin stories, and kind of weave a larger story for that emotional connection, that's when you can really start, to grab some attention. You're starting to really lift up the story from that product level to kind of like really start romancing a brand. And I think that's a tougher skill, definitely a little bit more advanced. And it doesn't mean that, I haven't seen junior writers be able to do that off the bat, but I think it's a different side of your mind, like to the left brain, right brain thing. I think, when you're writing about product, it's a little bit more focused, and you can really, there's kind of more of a template, I would say, on how to write for a specific product. Whereas if you're romancing a brand, or even pulling that product as part of the larger vision for the season, then it becomes more like, what am I trying to evoke? Like, what am I trying to really kind of create for the customer? How do I want them to immerse themselves in this world? So it's a lot tougher. It's a lot of fun. Both sides are a lot of fun. And it's actually interesting. Pottery Barn's the only brand really that I've worked in where those functions, they're within the same copy team or the same editorial team, but they don't cross over much. Like, there's a product copy team and there's a brand copy team, and we work together, but the functions are separate. Like, they're separate teams. That makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
that's actually interesting, even knowing that, so you can specialize if you feel more drawn to the product side of writing influential copy versus like the romanticizing storytelling and copy.
Yeah. And I would say, product copywriting is your bread and butter. First of all, you have to do that in order to do the bigger storytelling, I believe. Because especially if you're in the world of e-com writing, as I am right now, you can't tell a story unless you understand the product. It really is foundational to everything that you want to do. And there are a lot of brands out there. I mean, think of all the product pages out there in the world. Someone's writing every single one of those. There's a lot of volume to be had there. And so it's oftentimes the way a lot of writers, copywriters who want to work in e-com, get their foot in the door, either as a freelancer or in-house. There's a real, for cost efficiencies, there's a real push that I've seen over the last, I don't know how long it's been going on, maybe the last decade at least, if not two, of pulling the writers in-house, because besides being more cost efficient, you're just closer to the brand. You understand it on a deeper level. So like that in-house capability is oftentimes going to be a lot deeper than what an agency, even the best agency, can bring you, right? Because you're in the everyday meetings, you're understanding the marketing strategy inside out, versus having to be learning that in a brief, if you're on the agency side, and then kind of delivering it that way. So it's a very different way of executing the work. Did I answer your question? I feel like
you gave me a super in-depth answer, which I love. And you touched on so many things I want to say again, as just relating them back to someone who's maybe starting out, and how you could use what Anna just said. So I think the first thing that you said about immersing yourself, and even just right now, just saying the value of doing it in-house instead of versus a brief, even for me being, my own business owner, when I started writing copy for my Brand Sky Society, it has gotten so much better over the years of just me talking to so many girls that I can now say the words, the terminology, the feelings that they have, because I've spoken so much with them that I feel like I can just so much better articulate and communicate to them. And that's my experience as a business owner. And if you are, a marketer and you're on a team and you are trying to get better at writing copy, of just, like you said, just completely immersing yourself, really understanding your customer, really understanding the brand, is honestly just makes it infinitely easier. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, I'm sure definitely since you've known Pottery Barn or been connected for so many years, I'm sure it's a lot easier for you just because you just get it. And I think that's something that I feel like is overlooked when you're trying to be really good at copies. You just feel like it's some skill that you can have. But I think what you mentioned of just that research piece and that immersing piece is so invaluable.
Completely. Yeah. I really do think it is, you can't do it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out, right? Like if you're not getting the right inputs, and it can be yourself giving yourself the input, through research, like you just said, you're not really going to be delivering strong work. So I think that's really important. And again, to take it back to PI job, that job was such a seminal moment for me in my career because, like I said, asking questions like, how is this product made? How does it differentiate Pottery Barn in the marketplace? What do customers need to know to make a purchase decision? Those are all of the questions that I have to ask myself as a copywriter, right? And so all of these years, ever since that wild opportunity of a job that I thought had nothing to do with creative, that turns out was so foundational to all of the creative work I did thereafter, it was just like, it's kind of a fascinating thing to think about. So I think, for those who are interested in copywriting, there's just so much opportunity out there. It's ripe with possibilities. So many brands. I mean, even outside of home, like even outside of fashion and beauty, like the sort of more obvious things. It's like banks have copywriters, they have product that they're selling. Tech companies, obviously. I mean, think of every single thing in the world that exists that has to be explained to somebody is a job for a copywriter. And I'd love to know your opinion, Natalie, on AI, but I don't think that, sure, if you're a tech writer, maybe it's time to get a little bit nervous. But I mean, I think when you have a job like copywriting, where there is a level of that emotional storytelling, even for the product pages, it's so important there. I don't think that's really at risk with AI. Do you?
I'm so glad you brought that up, actually, because this is so fitting with our conversation. And it's one of the things, like when ChatGPT it's even already died down, because I think a lot of the initial excitement was just like hype around something new, but not actually the functionality of it yet. And I tried to use it to help me write, some copy. But I mean, who knows what the future will be, but at least I don't see anywhere in the short term of it being able to replace that emotion that you can write when you are a human and you are writing copy. I think that I've used it as like inspiration for writing, or to get some ideas. And if I'm like, drawing a blank and just like cannot start, I think it has been helpful. But I think in terms of a replacement, I think maybe for like very basic copywriting, like a lot of like SEO blogs, are written by ghost writers who just like don't even know anything about the subject. They're just using a formula. I feel like that may be taken over by AI. But I think that the true like product and the brand copywriting definitely needs that human element.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, it's that emotion that I think is key, right? Even the best machines in the world can't replicate the emotion that the human mind can evoke and really tap into. I mean, that's what I think personally. I think the interesting overlap might be the job of providing the input, for the copy to be automated. Like if that is creatively done so that the input gets really more creative and less robotic, I think that'd be an interesting. thing. I mean, we've tried, you know, in other brands that I've worked in at Pottery Barn, we've, you know, tried it for, let's say, subject lines, you know, but it never is the same. It just, you can just tell a robot wrote it.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels like very stilted and transactional, and it's just never as good as when we do it ourselves. And so, to be quite honest, we were like, we are wasting more time trying to get it automated to see if there's any merit to it than if we just like iterated, you know, 20 ideas on our own. So
Yes. I do think your point there about the input. So that is, for those who maybe don't understand it as well, as if, you know, you go into ChatGPT and you ask it to write something for you, you have to tell it what to write. And even in my own experience, the better you get about writing those prompts, the better your results are. Like you really have to, prompt engineering, I feel like, will become potentially a role that, you know, doesn't exist yet, but I feel like could in the future, because yeah, maybe if you can be better at doing those prompts, we could get better results, but it's still such a unknown at the moment. I don't think we're really close to it taking over anytime soon.
yeah, totally agree. Maybe that's your next business, Natalie. Creative prompt generation.
But it's so crazy because think about the people that were social. I mean, interviewed social media managers that were social media managers when social media was barely even a thing and it wasn't even a role. And their parents were like, that's a job. Like, that's insane. And like, look where we are today. So you also, you never really know. So it's interesting to kind of try to predict what those future roles will be that don't even exist yet, but will be very prominent in the future.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of fun to think about. Fun and scary at the same
Fun
time.
and scary. True. I agree. I agree. Well, Anna, we've talked about so much so far in the episode. This has been so fun. Before we wrap up, I want to know, because there's just so many more questions I could ask you, but is there any advice that you'd like to give to young women starting their career that you wish you would have known when you started?
Oh, I know. Okay, I'll try to distill it down because like my head is now inspired by this conversation and going down memory lane. But I'll go back to know your environment. Like, what environment will you thrive in? It's so important. Small brand, big company, you know, that question alone will kind of set the tone for the scope that you're going to take on, you know, the pace that you might be taking on. So I think that's really important. And related to culture, you know, what kind of team do you want to find yourself in? You know, does the team give you room to make mistakes if you're just starting out your career? Does it feel like a safe space, you know, in which to do that and kind of take on more responsibility and become stronger at what you do? Does it have room for growth? You know, do you see yourself there? Like, what kind of trajectory do you think you might find there? So I think just asking yourself, like, where am I gonna, how do I set myself up for success? You know, and then I would say, again, I'll reiterate the observe the top performers on the team, because that's really where you're gonna learn so much just by soaking in what they do, how they present themselves, how they show up, how they prioritize. I mean, I still do this today. It's like I've been lucky enough to, you know, expand my own roles for myself, but I learn by watching every day. And flip side is pay equal attention when things aren't so fantastic, right? And because those moments can be teachers, and sometimes what you're there to learn is how not to do something and how to avoid replicating those practices, that kind of behavior for yourself and for others down the road. I'll just maybe end this with one of the wise CEOs I used to work with. She said, don't spend too much time on teams where you think you're not going to learn much. You know, it was such good advice. And what she meant was not just like, she didn't mean like you can never, you know, there's always something to learn no matter where you're at. But she's like, if you're not going to be challenged, you know, and you don't see yourself growing there, don't waste your time. Like, move on and kind of, you know, grab the next opportunity.
The learning piece, I just tell that to young women all the time. All my accelerator students and graduates, I'm like, if you are trying to figure out what job to pick, prioritize the job that you're going to learn the most at, especially when you're young, because you can get fired they can take away your title, they can take away your job, like whatever. But if you prioritize learning, you are going to get so much farther than everyone else instead of chasing the title or the big company name, at least when you start. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Amazing way to end the episode.
Well, it was so much fun. I hope, like, who knows? Sometimes I feel myself kind of like rambling on. I'm like,
You did amazing, Anna. Thank you so much for sharing all of your incredible and inspiring advice. I think this episode is hopefully very motivating for the women listening. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story on the Sky Society podcast.
You. So good to meet you.